Well, hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Yay, let's go. My next guest, Laura Reese from the Heritage Foundation, helps us understand what's going on in the immigration world. And one headline made me think of you. I knew you were coming on today, and then I saw this. It says the Trump administration has converted the old CBP One app. It's now a self-deportation app. That seemed like a welcome change.
Yes, and thanks for having me on. This is something that we recommended, was for them to hang on to that app and repurpose it for this very reason. And to add not just a photo requirement of the alien, but also GPS to verify that, yes, in fact, an alien has departed the U.S. But this also goes to solve biometric exit, which is something that's been required for decades and has really been lagging. So this is a win-win.
When you say this was something recommended, you mean in the evil, hated Project 2025? Was this in Project 2025?
It was not in the mandates for leadership, the book, if you will, because this is a little bit more operational. But it was.
You could have scared so many people with that.
I know.
So what does this new app even do? Why would, if you're an illegal, why would you use this? Yes, let me get an app to deport myself.
Well, the Trump administration has also required aliens who are here to register, which is a long-standing section in the immigration law. And if you think about it, it makes sense. We have no idea how many people are here, who is here, or where they are, thanks to the Biden administration. And so they can use this app to register. They can use it to give a change of address. That's another requirement. But also it changes behavior, because if illegal aliens or deportable aliens know, hey, DHS or the federal government knows I'm here and can communicate with me, then perhaps they will comply with the law and be more likely to leave on their own accord.
Okay, so they don't get barred for life. So if you go ahead and sign up now and you get caught before you can get to the Rio Grande, then you're not like on the blacklist.
Yeah, there's already in the law various time bars for your readmission, and the Trump administration has hinted that I think they're going to come out with kind of some carrots and sticks, that if you self-deport and we don't have to spend the resources to locate you, detain you, deport you, then perhaps you could get a return to, let's say, the middle of the line and the back of the line, or no line at all if you wanted to return.
Well, we've seen the headlines, Laura, that the illegal crossings at the border are at historic lows, if not all-time lows. But what about the drug trafficking? Has that been slowed down, or do we even know yet?
Yeah, I mean, overall, American deaths from drug overdoses is declining, and so that's a good thing. It rapidly rose during COVID and during the Biden administration years when we had open borders. So it's good that the deaths are going down. In terms of seizures, that could go both ways. If there's more seized, does that mean there's more crossing, or we're catching a higher percentage of it? And for that, time will tell. But the cartels are very adept, and if they're not able to get their drugs across our southern border, then they will go to Canada and cross into the U.S. that way. They will go to other countries, but they're not going to give up this business easily.
All right, Laura Reese from Heritage Foundation. Do you have any insight on there's the story I saw over the weekend, a Palestinian activist who was one of the guys leading the Columbia protest where they were camping out for, I don't know, a couple of months there. He was arrested by immigration agents and is going to be deported. And a lot of people were saying, oh, he's being deported over his political speech. I guess we don't have free speech anymore. But there's a little more to it than that, I bet.
Yes, there are security grounds of both inadmissibility and deportability if you support terrorism. And he clearly has been in support of Hamas and threatening Jewish students at campus. And so that is a ground to not get a visa, or if you have a visa, to have it revoked, or even if you have a green card, to have that revoked and be removed.
I'm surprised people have problems with this because, they're so concerned about, politically motivated violence and political domestic terrorists. But when you have actual terrorists and people who are actually supporting terrorism, just openly in the middle, like in front of cameras. They write it on a sign and they hold it up in front of a camera. People are hesitant to deport those folks. It's like, I don't get that.
Well, I think it's two things. One, it hasn't happened in a very long time, so people aren't used to it. And two, this only goes one way, right? It's the very vocal minority that pushes anti-Semitism, and that's all you hear about. And so we need more people to speak out against that and to be the public majority, the vocal majority, to enforce it.
Well, I just appreciate the people so concerned about free speech. It's like, you shouldn't have phrases that you're not allowed to say. This is a free country. Well, if you're trying to be an immigrant, death to America should be a deal breaker.
Right. Clearly, millions of people want to come here. I think we can be a little bit more choosy about who comes and who gets to stay. So if this is how you're going to act here, then guess what? You leave and we'll find someone better.
All right. Well, fun little report. Where do we find your work outside of WBAP, Laura Reese?
They can find it at heritage.org.
What's your preferred death penalty execution method? History was made in South Carolina. Some guy named Brad Sigmund was killed by firing squad. I guess there was more than one gun there. I was just trying. I'm getting the story. The breakdown from this is from Dallas Express, dallasexpress.com. And coincidentally, I'm going to be talking with Chris Putnam in the next segment. He's the, what do they call it? The managing editor over Dallas. It's his outfit, dallasexpress.com. So that's where I'm getting this. But this is going to be a pretty heavy dallasexpress.com day, because also, you'll hear later. So I found this interesting, though. The guy's backstory doesn't matter. He's a terrible human being, totally deserved to die. Murdered his ex-girlfriend's parents with a baseball bat, whatever. So he said, hey, I'm looking through the options here, and it says technically I can request to be killed by a firing squad. And his attorney's like, whatever you want, dude. And so it came out, this guy had to stand with a target with a bullseye that marked his heart. A hood was placed over his head, and he was up against a brick wall at 6:05 p.m. I guess, what was this, Friday? Yeah. 6:05 p.m., boom, he shot. A doctor examined him for about 90 seconds, confirmed his death like a minute later, and now we're stuck with this weird situation where people are discussing whether or not this was correct. Should this have even happened? Some people are against the death penalty in all situations. I don't want to hear from you. No offense. This isn't an argument for you. But here's some options. What about lethal injection? I think it's almost impossible to say that that's cruel and unusual. You get one shot that puts you to sleep. After you're asleep, another shot stops your heart. Supposedly you don't feel a thing. I don't think you would feel a thing. But I think that's one of the ones I would choose, out of the menu. You look at the other one. This guy was also trying to get, or was it another guy? There was some guy that was trying to get killed by nitrogen gas, where they put you in a room, they pump in nitrogen gas, and you just gently fall asleep, never to wake up again. I don't know if I'd want a gas chamber myself. That's awful. Hanging is still an option in some states, and nope. I'll do a big negative on that. I don't want to have my neck snapped in one option. The other one is where you just slowly choke to death, like Debo's got you in a headlock. Not doing that. I'm not sure if the electric chair, I don't think I would choose it. But if that's what you want, fine. Is that cruel and unusual? That's kind of a maybe on my list. I think the only other one I would really be interested in is maybe the guillotine. I always thought that'd be a good way. If you were going to die anyway, just get your head chopped off like in the movies. Just like, look, if it's good enough for aristocracy, if Marie Antoinette, Louis the 16th, well, I guess the 15th and the 16th, then hey, why not me? If it's good for 30,000 common Parisians in the 1790s, it's good enough for old Parker here. But what do you think about this? Are we getting a little crazy here? Do we need to stop this firing squad? We're past that now. That was just a necessity of a simpler time. 800-288-9227. This is Mike in Dallas. You're on WBAP. What's your preferred execution style, sir?
Well, I think we might finally have found a use for all the fentanyl that's come into the country.
Oh, man, you know what? Add that to the list already. 7 points for Mike, because I even thought about that when I was setting up for the show earlier, and then I just forgot to say it right then. Yeah, actually, if I could choose out of something that's not even on the menu or has ever been on the menu, how about a heroin overdose? Or you know what I was thinking, Mike in Dallas? I was thinking the Chris Farley special. I want a speedball. Look, John, if it's good enough for John Belushi and Chris Farley, it's good enough for old Parker here. But, Chris Farley died from a mix of cocaine and morphine. People do morphine like recreationally. That's weird. But look, if you get to choose, you're right. You're right. Drugs, overdose. Just you feel so damn good, your heart stops. I love that, Mike. Thank you. Let's try Steve in Weatherford. You're on WBAP. What do you think?
I think we need to cut it down to 24 months after you're convicted. As long as it's clear that you did the thing, we ought to take you out in less than 24 months to send a message to everybody else. Screw up. We'll get to you real quick. Fix your wagon.
Yeah, we already have sort of an express lane here in Texas for people who want to waive all their appeals. They can get it done pretty quick. But what about all the guys that want to fight it? How long do you think they should be able to string it out? Because, on a long enough time scale, some of these guys have been exonerated. And that's the scary part about the death penalty is pulling that trigger too soon, metaphorically or literally.
Well, we have the capability to know if you did it or not know you did it. The not know yes will take 20 years. The guys we know you did it, you're toast in 24 months to send a message to the other bad guys. We're not going to play around and let you sit on your butt for 20 years and eat prison food and watch TV. We're going to take you out for doing something wrong.
Yeah, when people ask if the death penalty is effective, I'd be like, I don't know. I'd sure like to find out if we'd actually try it sometime. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Stephen Weatherford. Coming back to the James Show. The guy, the man, the brain behind the DallasExpress.com website. Chris Putnam's back on. Hey, Chris, welcome back to the James Show.
Good to see you, buddy.
All right, so in the last segment, I was bouncing off a story I first, I saw on DallasExpress.com where y'all went into a little more detail about the guy who was executed in South Carolina by firing squad. And just for funsies, do you have a preferred method of execution if you ever, get busted for running a controversial website and killed for your thought crimes? So what would your preferred method of execution be?
I'll take the needle. Just put me to sleep. I don't need to be shot.
Yeah, if it's an option, it hasn't been tried yet, but I would like to do the speedball thing that Chris Farley and John Belushi did, where you mix cocaine and morphine. I don't think that's one of the options. And then we had a pretty good.
I once had a big glass of red wine and took a muscle relaxer. Because I'd been doing some work, forgetting that I'd taken it, and that felt pretty good. So that might be a good way to go too.
Kids, we do not endorse the sideways comments of Chris Putnam on WBAP. Jason had sent in a comment. He said the death penalty should be done the same way they took the life. So, if there's like a rape and murder, I guess you got to get raped before the death. But, if you stabbed him to death, then you get stabbed to death. Or if you shot him, you get shot. Or if you suffocated him or choked him or left him in a closet for a week or something like that. I thought that was an interesting take. But let's get
an eye for an eye, I suppose, right?
Yes, that is sort of a medieval way to look at it. Goodness. I
do think there should be a special kind of death penalty for people that rape children.
Yeah, or anything children. Yeah, there's a special place in hell for them for sure. Now, I saw this first on your site, and then I had to bounce around to other sites to try and find more on it, but I didn't really get more on it. This was weird. A U.S.-flagged oil tanker collided with a Portuguese-flagged cargo ship in the North Sea, which is over there by like Great Britain and Norway, Sweden, that whole area above Europe. And this is an oil tanker. It was full of jet fuel that was owned by the U.S. military. So is this really, this doesn't feel like an accident. Is this just an accident, Chris?
I honestly couldn't tell you. It's definitely a bit of a strange story.
Right. So this is one of the things that's not even like a North Texas related story, but you guys broke that one first. Let's go over into Irving. We were talking about this last week on the James Show, that weird triangle of dirt that is where Texas Stadium used to be. Has all kinds of controversy because, look, I'm a guy that is pro legalized gambling here in Texas or everywhere. But the way they were trying to do it, the way they're trying to rezone that thing, it feels kind of sneaky. And even though I agree with like their end result, it feels like they're doing something wrong there. Explain that one, Chris.
Yeah. So what's apparently happened is, the city or somebody in city leadership, there's some discussion about whether the mayor was involved in these conversations or any other elected officials versus the city manager, is fast tracking basically a rezoning process for quote unquote gaming, understanding that casinos are still technically illegal in Texas, except for, I believe, some Native American ones. And so, look, that's a major or fundamental change to the character of your community. And I think the concern is that the community hasn't been involved. And now they're trying to fast track this vote to approve it, with the pretext being that if they don't, then the city of Irving is going to be not competitive in terms of competing for, one of the 10 casinos that would be approved under one of the bills that's currently in the Texas legislature that's being carried by Representative Guerin in Fort Worth. And so again, there's two issues, right? I mean, one issue is, are casinos right for Texas or not? But the second issue, and I think probably the one that's a little bit more concerning, at least at the moment, is the process and whether or not the community should be more engaged in that discussion, before they actually rezone something that hasn't even been made legal yet.
Well, thanks for keeping an eye on some of that. The other thing I saw on Dallas Express that it says explicitly North Texas story is when an analysis was made of how the country's biggest cities were handling their budgets. Of the 9 Texas cities evaluated, only 2 were run by Republicans, Plano and Fort Worth, but also there's only a couple of them that were operating in the black. I was kind of surprised by that.
Oh, I'm not. I'm a former mayor pro tem myself for a Tarrant County city, and we had a balanced budget, and we had incredibly clean financials. But a lot of these communities just carry a tremendous amount of debt. The debt service alone, costs taxpayers a ton of money. And then you start opening the door into how they're spending that money, and the questions about how they're spending that money. And there's a lot of nonsense out there, frankly. Well, a lot of waste. I mean, it'd be great. These discussions about having a Texas Doge, and of course that's at the state level. But really, every community should have somebody that's responsible for rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, and keeping clean financials.
Well, we say a lot of negative stuff, but this is the rare chance we get to highlight some positives here. The cities that actually ran, the biggest Texas cities that actually ran with surpluses, Corpus Christi, which isn't in our listening area, so who cares? But also Arlington and Plano. So give them credit. Well, all these other cities are running in a deficit or maybe breaking even. Arlington and Plano seem to have it together better than their neighbors. So kudos to them. What do they do different, Chris? Yeah,
I couldn't tell you what they're doing different. I can tell you what we did. We apply basically a zero-based budgeting model, and every year we make every department, and it's a laborious process. You go through a lot of internal discussions with various departmental leaders, but we make them go line item by line item through their budget and say, like, for this year we either need more of this, less of it, or the same, and here's why. Or we eliminate it altogether. And, what we see in the federal government, of course, and I'm sure this translates down to the local level, particularly in your larger cities, is they never look backwards at the things that they've approved in the past. So you could be spending money on something that is not even relevant anymore. But, some bureaucrat or, some department is sitting there, using it as a financial cushion, for however they're just operating their business day to day.
Chris Putnam, I got about 30 seconds left for you. Tell me how disappointing the Texas legislative session has been thus far.
It's frustrating. For all the reasons I think you've talked about on your show, the Senate, of course, moves with a tremendous amount of speed and a lot of certainty in terms of the types of things they want to get done and they want to pass. And the House just sits on things. And then they play this game where they say they've run out of time and they don't have time to get to certain things. And it's purposeful. They're basically pulling a head fake on, the voters and the taxpayers because they don't want to pass those things. And so just this dysfunction between, the Texas House and the Senate remains frustrating. And, every new session, which of course they only happen every other year, we become hopeful that dynamic's going to change. But as long as the same cabal is kind of in charge of the Texas House, it just doesn't look like there's the prospect of real change.
Yeah, well, I thank God it's only every other year. I think we should make it maybe once every 4 years. Chris Putnam, DallasExpress.com. I love your website. Thank you very much for your time on the show.
Thanks.
All right, so this happened about a week ago, but we didn't really have any details on the death of acting legend Gene Hackman. He's 95 years old. His wife, 65 years old. They were found dead February 26th in their Santa Fe home. God, that was like 2 weeks ago now, alongside one of their 3 dogs. So we didn't know what happened, and people, the internet sleuths were throwing out all kinds of just really fantastical stories. But this one's not great. This one is not a fantastic. There's no conspiracy. There's no murder suicide. There's not like some drug overdose. They weren't doing some weird BDSM, someone choked on a bondage mask or something. It's just a terrible story all the way around. The wife had some sort of weird virus. It's a rare rodent-borne illness called Hanta virus, Hanta virus. Never heard of that until this story. And she passed away. Now, maybe February 11th. Final toxicology reports are still pending. But when they got there, the bodies have been decomposing for a while. Now, Gene Hackman is gone. He has Alzheimer's, and she has basically been his caretaker through this natural decline for the last few years, which is why you hadn't seen him in public in a long time. And so what happened after that? We don't really know specifically, but they're left for you to infer that you have an Alzheimer patient who, I don't know if he hurt himself or he fell down or he just didn't eat or what happened. But we know that there was an Alzheimer's patient who, when his caretaker died, was left to his own devices, and he died sometime thereafter. Now, this is just god awful because Gene Hackman, I don't know what his specific situation is, but you've probably encountered someone with Alzheimer's, or at least heard stories about how they can be lucid for a few minutes at a time. And so one of the horrible things to think about is, Gene Hackman's probably shuffling around most of the day, not knowing what's going on. But did he ever, even if you're in that state, if you see your dead wife, that doesn't cause you to call 911? If you see your dead wife, and even if you don't recognize her as your wife, you see a dead person, do you not remember what 911 is? Do you not remember how to work a phone? So this is just god awful. Did he have moments of lucidity where he would walk into the bathroom and he would see his dead wife and he'd be like, oh my goodness, she's dead or she's in trouble. I need to call for help. And then he would go find the phone. And by the time he got to the cell phone, he would forget what he was looking for the cell phone for. Isn't this just a god awful story? Now I wish some of those conspiracy theories were true. I wish there was just a carbon monoxide leak somewhere in the gas line and they ended up going to sleep and not waking up or just passing out in the bathroom. I wish there was some guy who just came in and shot him for the head because he wanted to rob the jewel safe. That is just one of the most god awful, terrible stories. And it's super scary for me and you because this could happen to us. This didn't happen because, he's some elite guy who's a Richie Rich living up in the hills. And this could be me and Miss Parker one day. Anyway, it's not a fun story, but I thought you'd like to know what was behind the headlines now that we know the Gene Hackman situation. They're piecing it together because they have just the weirdest strands of information. They have information from his pacemaker. They have toxicology reports. We'll probably get a little more better understanding of the timeline. But as far as the events and in the order in which they happen, we think that's our best guess right now. Terrible stuff. Terrible way to go. All right. This is the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.